The last few draft classes the Detroit Lions have had have been big contributors to their team's success, and there's a lot of expectations for this upcoming rookie class. But what can the Lions actually do to help set these rookies up for success? Let's talk about it. So the Detroit Lions are coming into the 2023 season with a rookie class that a lot of people are having high expectations for. And a lot of that is because they went a very unconventional route by taking a running back high and a linebacker high and putting a little more emphasis on the offensive side of the football than the defensive side of the football, which is not something that many people expected. But you can't really argue with the pieces that the Lions have added to this roster. And so far, coming out of OTAs and mini camps, there's a lot of positive things coming out about this rookie class. Still, these guys are rookies. And while it's okay to have expectations, especially if you're high draft picks and you want them to contribute early, we still have to be able to understand that the Lions are going to have to do certain things, specifically looking at the coaching staff, are going to have to do certain things to put these guys in position to be successful on the field. So, what I want to do in today's video is go through every draft pick that the Lions made in this most recent draft and say, come up with at least one thing that this team needs to focus on so that they can get the very best out of each of these players. With that said, let's start with the Lions' first pick in this most recent draft, Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back out of Alabama. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs is already getting a lot of hype for what he's been doing in OTAs and minicamps, specifically when it comes to the receiver position. And there's been a lot of focus on it, and for good reason. Jahmyr Gibbs has been touted as this offensive weapon that the Lions are going to use in a number of different ways. So, with that said, the number one thing that this team needs to keep in mind when it comes to maximizing and getting the most out of Jahmyr Gibbs and setting him up for success is to do that very thing. Listen, when the Lions had Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift, obviously the goal was to be able to get more out of Swift than what they were able to get, but due to injuries, he was heavily limited. But even when DeAndre Swift came back, they were still very selective with his touches. And it's something that I look at with Jahmyr Gibbs and say, listen, if you really believe in this guy so much so that you took him with your first pick at number 12 in this draft, you have to be able to trust in his ability. And obviously, he's going to be splitting carries with David Montgomery. But at the same time, you need to be having Jahmyr Gibbs on the field, getting touches as frequently as possible. And I don't just mean as the receiver spot either. I mean in the running game. He has amazing vision. He has amazing quickness, and he has amazing burst to be able to take any run and take it for that 7, 8, 9 yards that Ben Johnson has been talking about wanting from the running back position. So when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs, listen, I don't want to see the Lions hold him back. I don't want to see them handcuff him simply because you're worried about him potentially getting hurt or you're worried about the longevity of his career. You're in the now, and in the now, you have to maximize his ability. You have to cut him loose and give him numerous touches and give him numerous opportunities to really impact the game, because he's the type of player that will make things simpler for every other aspect of your offense, from the passing game to, again, just how your offensive line is able to perform, how your quarterback is able to perform, and how the defense is going to play you, because they will know that you have this offensive weapon that can literally take it to the house no matter where he's at on the field. So when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs, the things that the Lions need to do to make sure that he's successful in the league is to unchain him and let him be the weapon that he truly is. Don't just holster this weapon. You actually have to use it in games so that you can get the big payoff that you were hoping for when you drafted him. Now, let's move on to the Lions' 18th overall pick, Jack Campbell out of Iowa. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Jack coming out of OTAs and minicamp, with some of the talk being that he may not start week 1 and that he's going to have to earn his spot just like everybody else does. First and foremost, like I've said in previous videos, I expect Jack to start week 1. And I expect once they get into training camp, he's going to put on full display why he should be that week 1 starter. But once he has that job, the Lions still are going to have to make sure that they're utilizing him the right way so that he can be successful on the field and that it will actually carry over from game to game. And one of the things that I think the Lions need to heavily prioritize with Jack Campbell in regards to keeping him in the right headspace and making sure that he can be successful in the field is to not utilize him too much in man-to-man coverage. Listen, Jack Campbell is an amazing athlete. And sometimes I think when coaches or even fans hear the word amazing athlete, we assume, like, oh, well, then he's perfect for man to man coverage. When in actuality, Jack Campbell functions best in zone coverage. He has amazing feel, he has amazing instincts, and he really has good eyes and good hands to be able to play the pass very well in zone coverage. So, with that said, listen, Aaron Glenn, over the past few seasons that he's been in Detroit, has been a very man heavy, defense that he's run. And the last thing that you should want to do with a young linebacker that is getting adjusted to the NFL speed and getting adjusted to the NFL game is to put him in situations where he may not have the advantage in pass coverage. And all of a sudden, his confidence is shot because he's given up one too many catches over the middle. Instead, if you put him in more zone coverage opportunities where he's most comfortable and where he has shown it, at least in Iowa, that he can play the pass well in those situations, you probably put him in more situations where he can play the pass better, where he can get more deflections, maybe where he'll get a turnover here or there and slowly build up his confidence. And of course, I'm not saying that you never put him in man to man coverage, but again, limiting the amount of man to man that you put him in so that over the course of a season, he can build up that confidence and not have to worry about being beat every time he has to be matched up one on one with a tight end or one on one with a running back. Because even though Jack Campbell is an athletic linebacker and he's definitely an upgrade when we look at athleticism over the rest of the group, he is still a rookie and he is still going to have to adjust to covering these running backs and covering these, premier tight ends in the NFL. So, if the Lions want to make sure that they're getting the best out of Jack week in and week out, you have to limit the amount of man-to-man coverage you put him in. Put him in a more zone situations, allow him to build that confidence, and the Lions will be happier, I believe, with the results that they get from him. Now on to the second round picks. And first up, we have tight end Sam Laporta, also out of the University of Iowa. Now, Sam has been turning heads left and right coming out of OTAs and minicamp. Every headline that I've seen so far has been about the praises and how well Sam Laporta looks and how he's probably the most developed and looks like the most ahead of everyone else in this draft class from a performance aspect on the field. So, with that said, the Lions probably feel very confident about what they have in Sam going into the season. Still, they have to do the right things to make sure that he's successful. And one of the things that I think the Lions could do to help Sam be successful is something that I used to actually say about their previous Iowa tight end, TJ Hawkinson. And that was that you have to utilize Sam in every aspect of your passing game. Listen, we all know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute bucket over the middle and utilizing him in the middle parts of the field so that he can be able to get those 7, 8 yard routes and catches literally at will. But with a guy like Sam Laporta, I think he will allow this offense to be even more flexible so that you can utilize Saint in even more ways. And because you have a weapon and because you have someone that like most defenses will focus on and be fearing in Amon-Ra St. Brown, it will give you that flexibility to be able to utilize Sam, not just as an inline tight end, but also flexed out wide, also using him in the slot. And so in a way, while Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably going to be the focus, having someone like Sam Laporta on the field at the same time will allow you to utilize Amon-Ra as a decoy so that Sam can be utilized to get open on a number of different types of routes because he is so versatile. So if the Lions want Sam to be successful this upcoming season, utilize that versatility. Utilize this offense that you've put together in all these various weapons to help him get open and to get him those easy catch and run opportunities that he's so good at, that he put on display at Iowa. Again, there were situations even when TJ was here where they were able to, again, probably because most people are focused on Amon-Ra St. Brown or DeAndre Swift, that TJ was able to be open and be able to take, catch and run and have big yardage. Well, Sam Laporta is even better, after the catch. So if you're able to get Sam in those situations, not only will your offense thrive, but your young rookie will start to build that confidence that I was talking about with Jack Campbell. And that will build over the course of the season, where again, now teams will have to focus on every aspect of your offense, not just a single guy over the middle in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Next on the list, we have DB Brian Branch out of Alabama. And Brian Branch is someone that, listen, we don't know exactly how he's going to be utilized, but from everything that has been coming out of OTAs and minicamp, we know that he will be utilized on the field. So how can the Lions get the most out of him when they finally do start to deploy him on certain situations? Well, the number one thing I think they can do to get the most out of Brian Branch and to make sure he's successful is to actually mix him in on a couple nickel packages. Normally on nickel packages, you typically go with two linebackers, and you have your coverage and then you have your, however many down linemen that you have. But by swapping in Brian Branch in place of another linebacker, while he may be undersized, he has the ability to tackle well and he has the coverage ability to be able to match up just about anywhere with anyone. And because he also has amazing blitzing ability as well. So by having a player like Brian Branch on the field and circle certain nickel packages, you could really start to confuse defenses because they're not going to be sure if he's dropping, if he's coming, if he's matched up man to man. You will be able to have more exotic not only pass coverage packages, but you will also be able to come up with probably some really interesting blitz packages as well, because you also have other good secondary players that are good at rushing the passer as well, in Tracy Walker and Chauncey Gardner Johnson. I'm sure Kirby Joseph would be excited to be able to rush the passer at certain situations. And with someone like Brian Branch on the field, you don't have to worry about having a linebacker trying to do something that a safety or a nickel corner should be trying to do, because you'll have a DB on the field that can easily drop in coverage, again, match up man to man, or do the types of things so that you don't have as big of a disadvantage on those certain situations, depending on the down and distance. So, utilizing Brian Branch in more nickel packages throughout the season could be a really good way to help set him up for success, while at the same time giving him some added experience so that he has a couple of plays here and there where he can get on the field and get accustomed to the NFL game. Now, moving on to the third round picks, first up, we have quarterback Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. Now, Hendon Hooker isn't expected to really contribute much or at all this upcoming season as he kind of recovers from his ACL injury. And so, the biggest thing that the Lions can continue to do to make sure he's successful is to take their time with him. And it's something that we've been hearing Dan Campbell and everybody preach about. Listen, there's no reason to expect or to rush Hendon Hooker back if all he's going to be doing anyways is sitting on the sideline. And hopefully that's the case, because if Jared Goff is on the field, there's a much greater chance that this team is going to win more games. Hendon Hooker needs to take his time, he needs to get healthy, and he needs to be able to watch, study, and learn the NFL game. If the Lions can help facilitate that for him and truly challenge him and truly push him, then hopefully by next year, he'll be able to come into the season as QB2, and maybe we have a quarterback, competition of some sorts if he's able to push Jared, um, based on, the fact of just having a different level of talent and having that time to mature and watch the game. Now, as for the Lions' second, third round pick, Broderick Martin out of Western Kentucky, that's a little bit of a different story. Broderick Martin is someone that I think the Lions are going to have to kind of do the opposite with. While you're going to probably do a wait and see with Hendon Hooker and letting him take his time to get up to speed, I believe the best thing that the Lions could do for Broderick Martin and for his development is to kind of throw him in the fire. And I don't mean necessarily give him starter reps, but I think Broderick Martin is going to get the most out of actually playing and playing meaningful snaps and being a true rotational piece on that interior defensive line. Listen, you have a D tackle that's coming from lesser competition, and he's already at a somewhat of a disadvantage just from playing against that lower competition. By getting him into some meaningful snaps and getting him playing against, again, starting caliber offensive lines, you can hopefully speed up his learning curve. Defensive tackle is a position where, again, I'm not saying that you can't learn a lot from film study, but I do feel like you would learn way more from actually being in those battles. And obviously, he's going to learn a lot in training camp and in practice by going up against Frank Ragnow and Jonah Jackson and Big V. But at the same time, don't let it be limited to just practice. Let him get out there and get some meaningful snaps. And I mean, and again, when I say meaningful, I mean sometimes getting him out there on a first down or a second down, not just having him in there on goal line packages or not just having him in on third and short, fourth and short type of situations. Get him in there so that he can understand how to play the game and actually put the things that he may be learning in practice and in the classroom and actually be able to live them out. Listen, we saw this with Kirby last year, where Kirby obviously was expected to kind of have a reserve role and kind of learn by just seeing. But once he got on the field, sure, he made some mistakes early, but those mistakes that he was able to make early allowed him to quickly adapt and adjust to where by the end of the season, we were all sitting here thinking that, like, yo, Kirby Joseph could be a future Pro Bowler, all pro type of safety. I'm not necessarily saying that Broderick Martin will take that same trajectory, but I do think he could benefit more so the same way Kirby did by actually playing and playing meaningful snaps. And if the Lions give those things to him, I think we will actually see something really impressive out of Broderick Martin. Now we're on to some of the Lions' later draft picks, and we're going to start off first with offensive lineman Colby Sorsdal. Now, Colby Sorsdal is a very interesting case for me. I think when you look at this offensive line, one of the things that will really benefit Colby is simply by just continuing to mesh and gel with this group. Listen, it's a close knit group, and it's one of the best offensive lines in football. And I think by Colby basically finding his fit and finding his mentor in these offensive line group could be a huge benefit to him. He's obviously going through a position change going from tackle to interior. And so latching onto a guy like Big V or latching onto a guy like Jonah Jackson could be really beneficial to Colby because, again, he's going to have a little bit of an uphill battle even just making this roster. And so the best thing that he's going to be able to do to be successful and the best thing the Lions can do is continue to attach him to more veteran players, especially someone like Big V who has gone through that transition of playing tackle to playing interior, and someone who can kind of teach him the ropes and help him speed up that progression that he's going to need to hopefully, in the future be a pivotal piece of this offensive line. Let's not forget, offensive linemen and linemen in general can suffer injuries at any given time. Fortunately, the Lions last year didn't have a ton of them, but they did have some at various points in 2021, and to the point where, again, there were rotating pieces. If Colby Sorsdal can take the time to learn from his veterans and really, you know, take to, their teachings and what Hank Fraley is basically teaching in the classroom, we may be able to see an offensive lineman in the next year or two that is actually ready to contribute. And finally on the list, we have Antoine Green, the wide receiver out of North Carolina. Now, Antoine Green is really in a tough situation because, again, the wide receiver room is very interesting. Obviously, you have your guys at the top in Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Josh Reynolds, Khalif Raymond, and Marvin Jones. Those are your five right there. Antoine Green will have a very strong opportunity to be that six wide receiver if the Lions decide to, go that route to carry six or potentially even seven, especially since JMO is going to be serving a suspension those first 6 weeks. So, in my opinion, the best thing the Lions can do to set up Antoine Green for success is actually to give him a good amount of reps with Jared Goff. Because, again, Antoine Green, when you look at the other wide receivers that could be pushing for that wide receiver six, wide receiver seven spot, is probably the most capable. Lions beat writer Eric Schlitt recently said on a Pride of Detroit podcast that Antoine Green looked like one of the more professional wide receivers when looking at, those wideouts that were kind of be battling for those spots. So by giving him more snaps and more opportunities with Jared Goff, that's only going to help strengthen their chemistry so that in the event that Antoine does have to play, there doesn't have to worry. We don't have to worry necessarily about there being a disconnect, that these guys will actually understand what is expected of one another. And hopefully, if he does make the roster and if he does get an opportunity to play meaningful snaps, then they can really maximize his ability in that regard. So, guys, those are my opinions for what I believe the Lions could do to help set up this rookie class for success. Let me know in the comment section below if you agree, if you disagree. Maybe there's something that you think the Lions especially need to do with a specific player to help them be successful in their first rookie season. I would love to talk to you guys about it. So, like always, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you're new, hit that notification bell so that way you'll be notified of anytime I upload a video and anytime I, pop up on a live stream. All right, guys, I'll catch you in the next one.